Alrighty, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Bap and Two Meat podcast, where we explore people's passions in life. We cannot get them all talking about what it is that really floats their boat. And I am delighted today to be joined by Paul Ashford from Fifth ElementNI. And the reason why we've got Paul on is because way back in the day, I had a wee bit of a flirt with breakdancing. And I know some of you are looking at me, probably really thinking I could spin now as a yarn. All right. But absolutely delighted to have Paul on to talk about his passion there. So, Paul, welcome to Bap and Two Meat. Good to have you on.
Nice one, man. Thanks, Glenn, for having us. Cheers.
Brilliant. So, Paul, give us a wee bit of an introduction about to who you are. Maybe, and obviously we'll spend a wee bit of time getting into the whole idea of how you ended up getting involved in breakdancing. But maybe try without maybe mentioning breakdancing.
Yeah.
Tell us a wee bit about yourself.
Yeah, sweet. So my name's Paul. I'm a breaker. Been breaking now for about 20 years or more. I'm part of a crew called Northern Souls Crew, and we also are all members of Fifth ElementNI, which is a hip hop charitable organisation here in Belfast. And yeah, originally from County Armagh, grew up in the sticks, grew up in the fields, so I have zero street cred. So I had to come to Belfast, meet the Belfast City Breakers, and yeah, get initiated into the culture that is hip hop.
Brilliant. So one of the first things I'm going to ask you about is obviously the name of the podcast is Bap and Two Meat. You ever had a Bap and Two Meat?
I've been questioning what that means. I've heard you say it a couple of times now, so you have to enlighten me, man.
No worries. Well, listen, where it comes from is whenever I went to school, one of the few things that I actually enjoyed about school was whenever we were able to get out at lunch times. At third year, we were allowed to leave school and go to the shops that were in the surrounding area. And one of them was this place called the Bap Shop, which was just an odd name for the bakery. But they introduced us to this thing called the Bap and Two Meat, which was essentially a big Belfast bap with loads of butter in it, with it all hollowed out, and two hot sausage rolls put on it. Man, it was the absolute dogs. So it was. Nice. And it's one of those things, whenever I was thinking about a name for a podcast, I was like kind of going, what would kind of, really kind of sum up that thing? If I was looking at it, I was like going, a Bap and Two Meat would really do it. So there you go. So you're bound to have had something similar to that.
I've heard of like sausage roll sandwiches and everything. It's definitely a Belfast thing. This never existed. Like, I still don't think it exists in Armagh. Like, but the Belfast bapping, with that's another level of like.
Well, it is indeed.
Sausage roll sandwich.
I'm actually hoping that that the shameless plug time here is that the Belfast Bap Company that operates down in the markets. Hey guys, if you're looking to sponsor a podcast, this one might be a really good one for you to get involved with. So, Paul, before we delve into the whole breakdancing thing, talk to us about maybe what some of your early passions in life were. Where were some of the things that kind of caught your attention early on in life before this kind of stuff took over?
Well, I mean, like I say, I grew up outside Armagh, outside Tyrone, basically on the border, and we grew up in the countryside, so there was very little to do. But my dad, like, he was very artistic back in the day, and so that was my earliest passion, was just art, just creating anything, drawing, painting, sculpting, whatever it was. But there was always this sort of like background interest in music, and that really comes again from my parents. So my mum left to move to England when she was 15 for work and stuff, and then she eventually met my dad. But the difference between growing up in Armagh and then moving to London, like, it opened her world to like music, the music scene over there. Like, it was during the 70s, so they brought back a lot of like stories and from London back to Armagh. And when we were born, like, obviously we heard these stories, and I got more and more interested in just like the alternative underground music scenes that they experienced over in London. But my passion for music started quite young, and that was just going through their records, putting them on. It was like discovering stuff. And again, growing up back in the 80s, like, you couldn't just stick on Spotify and find music instantly. Like, there was fun in hunting stuff, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And like, again, just being an impressionable young kid, you always just looked up to your parents, and whatever they listened to, you listened to. And luckily for me, that was a lot of like funk and soul and a lot of like black cultural music growing up. And that's just because my mum loved drums, and she'd always go on about, I love drums, and she loved gospel. She never played any of it. She just was like emphatic about it, and she was like, she just loved talking about it. So that kind of like set the tone for me from an early age. And luckily for us, like, at the time, I have an uncle, Sean, who is a big inspiration in my life. He moved to America as a young lad, and then started working for some record companies,
Uh-huh.
as an auditor, as like an accountant and stuff. But every year he would come back, and on Christmas time he'd have stacks of promotional
Right.
CDs, from all these artists who are either about to come out or were popular or whatever. But as a kid, it was just like a mystery to me. Everything was like a source of inspiration, something to dig through and to like try and find. Yeah, just feed the curiosity basically. And then through this like repetition every year, getting new CDs and stuff, and it was all random. Like it's not like with one tone. It would have been country, rock, hip
Uh,
hop, funk, soul. There's everything. But I used to just kind of like dig through it, headphones on, and then find what I liked, and that luckily became funk, soul, original rhythm and blues and stuff like that. So
yeah.
that was like early like passion that I didn't even know I had back then, if you know what I mean.
Right.
But it
Okay.
literally oriented me to where I am now in a
Yeah.
certain degree.
Any standout track, anyone that you kind of came across for it that was one of those tracks that you, when you heard it, you just kept playing it over and over and over again?
Yeah, well, definitely. Like Michael Jackson was a huge favorite of mine when I was a kid. Like my first LP was the Thriller LP.
Yeah.
And that's when tapes and CDs were starting to come in, but my parents bought me the vinyl for it,
Right.
which was a
Okay.
real standout memory for me. But yeah, in terms of tracks, like it's hard to say specific tracks, but in terms of artists like Little Richie, James Brown, Clarence Carter, um, thinking like Ella Fitzgerald, like a lot of classic soul and funk singers. And again, it was just that I think it was just the rhythm, like the type of drums, that rock rhythm, like that eventually evolved into what is hip hop now is the kind of sound that kind of got me back then, if you know what I mean.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned quite a few artists there in
Hmm.
terms of that there, I know, and obviously Michael Jackson. So, a wee bit, in terms of, because for me, I was that sort of born sort of early 70s and stuff. So whatever I was in the house, for my mom had, it was the Beatles, the Stones,
Hmm.
and even like Led Zeppelin and
Yeah.
Taste, Rory Gallagher and Taste and stuff like that. So I kind of was brought up a wee bit on that type of stuff, and then as we like evolved into the 80s and stuff, that
Hmm.
early 80s thing, you kind of started to get, become more aware of, the pop stuff that was
Hmm.
starting. Because
Hmm.
obviously the top of the pops on every Thursday night and all that
Yeah.
kind of. You started to become a wee bit more aware of that, and the electronic stuff started to
Hmm.
appear in the early 80s and stuff. And
Yeah.
obviously we'll get into that. So it was a real time of flux around that
Hmm.
and that there. But obviously, if you're heading towards Thriller was what, just was that late 79, 80, was it?
Oh, I'm not even sure. I think it would have been maybe the 80s.
Yeah,
Like
was it?
I was born in 84 and I got that when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Now it may have been already out. I just can't remember, but yeah, I
Yeah,
think it was 80s.
yeah, okay. So where did the idea of breaking and stuff then start to come in from? So you obviously you started to develop this passion for music, but where did that kind of transition into this idea, your first connection
Mm.
with like breaking? Where did that come from?
Um, as cheesy as this is, it's the Run DMC video. It's like
Right?
that. That was my first time ever seeing people move in a different way. And like I grew up, tried a bit of Irish dancing here and there. It was like it was
Okay.
apparently there's a story my mom said that I refused to go to Irish dancing because I only wanted to dance like Michael Jackson. That I was like, no, I'm not going. But anyway, I gave up that, and I used to keep going up to like the video shop back in the
Right?
day. We used to go and rent the VHSs, and I would always go in and just buy them or rent the Michael Jackson music videos on VHS and practice the dance moves in front of that. So that like the taste for dance came early. But then yeah, it was only whenever I was about 12, I think, when Run DMC is like that was released, and I saw the music video, and that was me hooked. I was like, I want to learn how to do this. Again, zero opportunity living in Armagh, and like, but for some reason it stayed with me. Like it wasn't until I was 19 where I started breaking. Like so for
Right?
8 years, 7, 8 years, it was there, just
Uh-huh.
itching. And I even remember like oldest memories is me trying to do like backspins in my granddad's garden and
Right,
stuff, and like
okay.
going into the art class trying to do it in school, but like
Uh-huh.
nobody, like I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I just had this like I want to spin. I don't know how to do it. Um, and yeah, I just started like I suppose trying to find as much as I could about breaking in the most limited ways possible. And when we first got the internet, that was funny. Like, you know, it would take you a full week to download a song, say, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
if you had a GIF of like a breakdancer doing a head spin, it would take an hour to download the GIF, and you'd be like watching it, waiting. And that's how I started like trying to see what I could copy, if you know what I mean.
Uh-huh.
And I remember downloading like steps on how to do a 6-step, but it was in written format. Like step
Right.
1, put your hand here, step 2. And I was trying to read this and do the moves, and it wasn't making any sense. And
Right, okay.
but there was this hunger. It's like, right, I need to get this. And then, you know, throughout those 7 years, there was little moments that just kept reminding me. And so we would have gone on holidays as a family, and one of the hotels we were in, I think they had like some breakdancers come in and do a bit of a show, and I was just transfixed, and they were doing windmills and everything. I went, holy shit,
Right.
this is live, this is real. Then they got us all up, you know, they pulled people out of the crowd and to make you do something, you know, try and copy them. But the whole time I was just like itching
Right,
to
okay.
go. And then my mom was afterwards was saying to me, she's like, oh, you were so on rhythm the whole time. And it's funny, like she was so passionate at the time that
Uh-huh.
I was just this dumb 10, 12, 13-year-old or whatever it is. She's like, okay. But she was instilling this sort of like confidence in me that I can do this, and you know, maybe one day I'll do it. And that just kind of led me to where I am now. And then I was trying to move to Belfast to go to university. I was playing with the idea of going to Derry for university
Right, uh-huh.
purely because I'd found out there was breakdancing up there, and I was
Right.
like, okay, I'm going to go there. Turns out it was probably some commercial hip hop class or something up in Derry, and it wasn't of any interest. So I ended up coming to Belfast, going to Jordanstown, and met the Belfast City Breakers. And then I swear to God, it's almost like the universe was just giving it to me, like they were leading me towards this, and now I'm here and been breaking 20 years. So
Okay.
it's kind of crazy.
So what are we talking there in terms of years ways? What in terms of what like early was that we're talking early 90s then or
Oh, for me, no, it would have been so 2000 and I'm 39 now. I've been breaking about 20 years. So we're 19 years old. What's that? 2003?
right,
Something like
okay.
that.
What? Wow.
2003.
So, because for me, that's like kind of goes.
I mean, that's way past the
Yeah, it's weird.
80s.
It is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because for me, whenever I'm looking at the whole idea, whenever we were in that, really at that emergent
Mhm.
stage, you know, well, obviously it had been out for a quite a period of time before it landed here. But you know, I remember my first encounter with the whole breakdancing thing was probably around about 84, maybe late 83, 84, and it was at a community center, and there was a disco on, like, and I don't even realize how I even was old enough to be going into the disco, but we were in the disco, and at one point during the night, the floor kind of just the crowd just kind of disperses, and there's this circle appears in the middle
Yeah.
of the floor, and these guys are doing what obviously I then found out to be breakdancing, and I was like kind of going, my God, I want to get a wee
Yeah.
bit of that kind of
Yeah.
thing going on, you know. And it turned out to be that there was a crew that wasn't that far away from me. So I grew up obviously in East Belfast, off Tapmere Avenue. There was a crew that was operating down in the D Street area,
Mm.
and they were called Sonic Rocks,
Right.
ZRC.
Shout out Craig, shout out Neil. How's it going, boys?
So so I remember that, and then it was just, but I remember that same kind of thing, you know, going down to where they were, because all it was a pile of it was a bit of lino out on the street or whatever, you know, the ghetto blaster kind of
Mhm.
thing, you know, the big fat battery thing, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
and people were just taking turns and stuff, you know, and you were like kind of standing there, and somebody says, "Well, you getting on to do something?" I'm like kind of going, what am I gonna do? Like, you know, you just tried to copy what you'd seen
Yeah.
somebody else doing and stuff. But it was
Yeah.
one of those kind of things as well where nobody actually showed me
Hmm.
any moves. It was all done from watching other people, and then obviously getting our hands on the likes of Beat Street, Wild Style, all
Hmm.
those kind of things that it became, hey, that's the only way you're gonna ever learn how to do any of these
Right.
moves and stuff, you know what I mean? So it was like a real suck it and see kind of thing. You
Yeah,
really just
yeah.
you didn't have a baldy's notion of what you were doing, like, you
But I
know?
think that's the beauty of it, right? Because it's the mystery. And like if it was handed to you the way it is now, in a way, in a sense, like you may not have jumped on it. Do you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Like, you know, back then, especially in the 80s, like it's funny, there's a lot of clips on YouTube like breakdancing in Limerick in 1986 or whatever.
Yeah.
And you just see how everybody's dressed in the town and they're all wearing like some shade of brown, right? And then there's these people in luminous tracksuits. spinning on the street. Like it must have just been bonkers to
It
see. Like,
was weird, like, for me, because we that was the start of all that, the sneaker style and all that kind
aye,
of stuff had
yeah,
started to change. We were wearing these blue Puma tracksuits and stuff, so it was like a two-tone, so it was navy blue up to here, but then the arms were like a sky blue.
mm,
With the white Puma and stuff on it, and then you were running around them, these canvas trainers and stuff,
uh-huh,
and then with the laces
the
and
fat
stuff like that
laces,
there,
yeah,
and then we get into the thing where you were putting like tubing inside your laces to make them to make them stand out and stuff. You know
quite,
what I mean? It was nuts, and then it was the so Nike had started to come onto the game around then. I remember the first time I ever wore one of the classic, the breaker jackets, in terms of the windbreaker jackets
mm,
with a classic V on it,
mm-hmm,
but they only came. The shop that stocked them only had them in one color. That was grey, so it was like dark grey and grey at the top, which was in complete contrast to
mm,
what you were running about in
right,
prior to that. There, you know what
yeah,
I mean. So it
yeah,
was it was one of the first times outside of BMXing, which was the stuff that would have been for that you really started to see this idea of an American culture thing
yeah,
kind of take root with people. Do
for
you know what I mean?
sure.
So it was crazy.
And yeah, like the explosion in terms of fashion alone is remarkable. And I think like that's why culture, or sorry, hip hop is such, to me, is an important culture, because it's not just an art form. It's like it literally changes how people feel about what they want to dress and how they present themselves to the world and how they carry themselves. And that's something I learned. Took me a long time to learn how to,
Uh-huh.
like, I suppose, carry myself in a confident way. That it's not to be have bravado or cockiness, but it's just to be confident in yourself, and that's through learning the abilities like breaking and grafting and
Yeah.
all that, and yeah, feeds back in. But I would like I love the history of breaking. Like we, myself and a crewmate Connor, shout out Breakwiser, we run a podcast as well where
Right.
we interview legendary breakers from back in the day,
Uh-huh.
Ken Swift, like for example, and a load of others. But we have a fascination with the history, not necessarily um like what it was like back in the 80s, but what was it like before it started? Like how did it happen to go from a country that's quite insular and has its own little problems to now America, cultures landing in, and it's just exploding and just taking the world by storm. So yeah, this is why like I was really interested in chatting to you about like even a little bit more about your time back in
Uh-huh.
the 80s and like where it took you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was strange because it wasn't like, that I could pinpoint any one thing that would say, because it wasn't like it just seemed to be, it was like one of these fad things that had come in,
Hmm.
I'd already mentioned the idea that you had the BMX and kind of thing had come in, and people had been doing that. And then breaking seemed to be the next thing that
Uh,
kind of rolled in from the States. So I don't even, because I don't even remember talking to the guys in the crew about, well, where did you pick this up and stuff. It just
mm-hmm,
always was like, this is happening,
mm-hmm,
and
mm,
this is what we're trying to do, and everybody was just getting in on it. And you had, I mean, our crew was massive, like,
mm-hmm.
I think at one point there must have been about 35 of us, you know what
Serious,
I mean?
right?
So
Class.
all knocking about, was a real, there was a real sense community thing,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and then, but there was very few crews over on our side of the town and stuff. If you wanted to encounter
mm-hmm.
anybody else, then you had to come into the town. But given initially the state of play here in Belfast and sort of that 84,
Mm-hmm.
85 period, sometimes coming into the town was you were taking your life in your hands.
Right, for sure. Yeah.
And it was like I'm going to some of the clubs where they were allowing people to break and stuff, was like, oh my God, that's maybe a wee bit too close to somewhere
Right.
we're maybe not feeling so safe in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so, but it's when you got there, that's when those kind of barriers broke down and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you got
Mm-hmm.
to see some of the guys. I remember the first time I came across the PCP and just start being like absolutely like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I thought I was doing something half decent, and then you see these guys and like going, whoa. wonder where
Mm.
where they picked that stuff up on. It was great to watch because you were able to kind of get pointers and stuff from them, just by watching how they
Yeah.
get on and things.
Yeah.
And I remember once we were on the floor, and it was one of those things you were talking about there about bravado, and I remember getting on. I think my real specialist move would have been crab walks, and it was one of those where I was just. That was the one of the things that I really seemed to take to. And it was one of those things whenever we were battling anybody that I was left at the end of that kind of section to do that because, and it's no word of it, but there wasn't too many people who were going as
Right.
fast as I was going.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, if they were taking me, they were getting down in windmills and stuff, and you knew that
Yeah.
was here, that we need to do something else to kind of take that. But I remember doing this at one of these clubs in the town and not thinking anything of it, but I had been going that fast and my hand slipped and I kind of went into a bit of a backspin, but I ended up posing at the end of it,
Yeah.
right? And I happened to land in front of one of the other crews, and I like, and you could see almost like, oh, is that somebody? Is he throwing down? Is he putting it on us? Like, you know what I mean? And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and one of the guys in our crew was like, "Well, get you up, get up. We're not here for a battle. We're just here to have a dance." You know what I mean? So it was great crack. Like, so
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's cool, man. I think that's the beauty of it. I love the most about hip hop culture is that, like, especially over here where tensions were so high, right? Hip hop garners respect, not because you're in hip hop, but because of the abilities that you're developing within hip hop. So it's a very physical culture, whether you're doing breaking, graffiti, rapping, or DJing. Like, there's a physical element to it. And by improving that physical element, you get respect. And it doesn't matter if where anybody's from, if they have a similar ability with you, it's pure respect. And that's where I think, and from speaking to BCB and like they're what's the term, like they have people from both sides of the fence within the crew, and they talked about this sort of like the unity that hip hop brought to Belfast in a
Yeah,
sense, you know?
it definitely did have that kind of effect, because it suppose there was like almost, it's interesting maybe when you think about that, maybe one of the reasons why it did connect here was because of you still had that in the States you would have had that gang mentality,
Hmm.
where the crews almost replaced the
Hmm.
gangs,
Hmm. Hmm.
and instead of having a fight, they were having a battle or
Yeah.
a rocking or whatever instead of
Yeah.
having that. And I think there's maybe an element of that was,
Yeah.
was part of this, a preemptive kind of peace program almost, that people were kind of getting in on that. So there's part of that. But you could almost say, when people were developing their moves, and you almost knew whenever you went to sort of battle another crew, well, such and such is their guy for windmills. There's
Yeah,
this
and you
guy
put
for
your
this.
guy.
You
Yeah.
knew
Yeah.
who you were hitting and stuff, and then all of a sudden you were throwing a curveball.
Mm.
Someone who didn't have a particular move gets down and does that and absolutely nails it, and you're like
Mm.
kind of going, all right, okay,
Yeah.
this is getting
Yeah.
a wee bit serious now,
Uh-huh.
in terms
Yeah.
of this guy's throwing windmills and whatever else, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
I remember but it was all that kind of thing of even just trying to get your windmills down and stuff, that whole, because I was thinking about this as I was preparing in my head for it, and I was like going, remember the first time I was trying windmills, it was the basics, the way you
Hmm.
get your hands down, and then you're watching some of the other guys who were doing what we would have called them the Americans, which was like this here,
Yeah. No
and then you
hazard.
had the bobs, which was holding your leg in your armchairs, which was your hands on your knees and stuff like that there. But it was trying to get those
Hmm.
was where you end up injuring yourself a wee
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
because you were trying to get the spin movement right without clipping your hip off
Yeah.
the ground and
Yeah.
stuff, and that's where, but you still had to try and keep that low center of gravity in
Yeah.
order to kind of keep yourself, to make it spin, to get yourself
Hmm.
spinning and stuff. I remember once we were down in the community center, and I hadn't been doing great with the windmills, and this one night I just kicked in. And for whatever reason, it just seemed to happen.
Right.
And I just landed this set of like smooth windmills, Marigans going into bobs, and was going for ages. Just didn't seem to be like stopping. It was just like it just constantly going. And then when we were doing, later on, we're like, going, all right, show us that again. And when I went down to do it, I couldn't do it again.
There you are.
It was like it was gone. And
See,
it's crazy. So it was.
yeah, so it has to come, has to be given to you. Like, it has to come at the right moment. I think it's like you got windmills for the first time that moment in a sense, and it's because you get rid of, oh, how am I doing this? Am I doing it right? And I think that's when the instinct comes in, you
Yeah.
know. But then when the brain kicks back in, you're
Picks
like,
it. That's because that's when the hips started hitting the floor again and stuff, you know. And I was like, oh, I've lost those now. And then you spend your time. What was it I was doing? And
yeah,
it does. But the more you think about it,
yeah,
the less you get it, and the
yeah,
more frustrated you can kind of
that's it.
get. Because what I ended up with this massive bruise just around the hip whenever I was doing it. I was like, going. Now I ended up getting back into the swing of it. I got because with me, what I found was that my legs are just ridiculous, you know, in terms of the way they're shaped and stuff. My knees and all are all misaligned and stuff, you know. Not to do with breakdancing, like, but that's just the way I am. And but once I was able to kind of, you know, figure out here if I just lean ever so slightly this
Right?
way,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
then I'm gonna be. I actually got it. You know, I
yeah,
was able to work out. Well, if I just moved just ever so
yeah,
slightly here, it started to flow a lot more, and
yeah,
it was great. Like, you know,
and
so
that's the hook, that's the drug, that's the moment you're like, all right, now it's all been worth it.
yeah.
Because I questioned myself, for I still do, like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? And
Uh-huh.
for what gain? Is it for this move or this combo or for whatever? It's like, well, you know, if I'm going to be in pain, I might as well have a good story behind it.
But it was even the stuff you did, like, you know, the stupid stuff where people were doing like suicides and you're
Aye,
jumping off chairs and all. You did, you think back, like, going, how some of us did end up with serious back injuries as a result. Is ridiculous. Like, you know, some of the things that that you did, and you know,
that's
were
it.
just mad. And then the fact that you were basically spinning on your loaf, on like a piece of, you know, that's on the street. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It was like kind
yeah.
of going like somewhere along a lane, and especially you know, something could have happened, and then it started to get more acrobatic as part of that. You know, you were
Mhm.
in the backflips started to come in. Everybody's trying to replicate flares and stuff, you know.
Aye.
So you were watching Alexa, you know, you're watching Crazy Legs on Beat Street and going,
Hmm.
fuck, how do we do flares? You know, and then
Yeah.
you realize in here, that's a gymnastics move.
Hmm.
You know, and you're like, oh, I'll go and find somebody who's doing gymnastics
Exactly.
and teaches how
That's
to
it.
do flares and things like that. So
Yeah.
it was one of those things the things that you didn't think that you would have been into, like the gymnastic aspect of that, you know, you were like, kind of, we need to go and find some people who can
Exactly.
teach us how to do this, you
That's it,
know.
man. And
So
it's cool like that. I don't know. It sets something in you, and then it orients you towards just like, I've got a mission to solve. Even though you don't know it, but you've become so hungry that, like, we started going to gymnastics classes and all
uh-huh.
because, oh, just so we can get X, Y, and Z. And it's a it's a real, like, uh, journey of pain and suffering and high moments, and it's a real roller coaster.
Yeah.
But that's the hook. It's like skateboarding, parkour, any of these things. It's not a it's the journey is the important part.
Yeah.
Getting the thing is just a part of the journey, you
No,
know.
it is, and I think for me the other thing was that because it was one of those things that you had a lot of different elements that kind of made it up. So for the music,
Mm,
you know, and really getting into that thing, then you had obviously the style aspect, the
mm-hmm.
tracksuits, the trainers, you know, trying to copy even the likes of Lee from Bay Street with your hat with the ski goggle and all that kind of stuff, you
Yeah,
know. You know, you were trying to replicate
yeah.
some of the stuff that you were seeing. And then you were getting into that graffiti side of things. You started to
Mm.
become more aware that, hey, there's a lot more
Well,
to
that's
this
it.
than sort of meets the
Hmm.
eye. And some people were really great at the artistry side of things, and
Hmm.
some people
Hmm.
started to develop, you know, the likes of, you know, I remember Glenn Malloy, you know,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
terms of
yeah.
him becoming a DJ and stuff. And it's interesting because Glenn's one of these guys. He was in here not that long ago, and I hadn't seen Glenn in ages. And when he walked in and he'd sort of he'd mentioned it, and I was like going, I said, you know what? My lost in memory of you is us having a bit of a battle in the toilets upstairs in Orangefield School, and me pulling your track bottoms down. And
That's a legal.
I
That's
was,
an illegal move now in Britain, like, you know.
so, but because you used to do, I used to knock people's hats off and
Aye,
stuff, you know, and
yeah,
you were
yeah.
doing the up rocking and kind of things. And I remember this here, he just opened himself up, whatever else, and I was just deep eggs with the thing, you know. But
That's
he's,
funny.
but it's those are the kind of, I suppose, the memories you have. Is there a seminal moment that you can kind of point in which really solidified you're kind of going, this is what I want to be doing with my life?
I don't. It's one of those things. I don't think I ever thought this is what I want to be doing in my life. I just remember going, no, this. I think this is it. Like, I don't think I'm going to stop this. Well, and there was definitely a few moments where I wanted to walk away, but that was just because, you know, breaking's all about finding yourself. And at the start of breaking, especially the younger years, through uni, my confidence was really low.
Hmm.
And then trying to like learn breaking with low confidence isn't a good mix, because you just beat yourself up and you're like, oh, I'm shite, I'm not going to get this, that, or the other. And
Uh-huh.
so there was plenty of times where I just didn't believe in it, but I just couldn't let go. And I always remember joking early days, going, I'm going to be a breakdancing granddad one day. And it's still in me to a certain
Uh-huh.
degree. Don't know if I'm going to survive till then, but I'll try. Like, but seminal moments, like, I suppose the first time I ever battled was
Right.
definitely like a moment of pure anxiety, exhilaration, everything. Like, I remember just being so nervous beforehand. And there was a Chinese b-boy living over here at the time. He was studying over in Jordanstown, and we became friends, and he convinced me, let's go down to this Dublin to go to this battle. And at the time when I started, there was no battles, there was no real scene as such. It was
Uh-huh.
all kind of dying down quite a
Aye.
bit. Belfast City Breakers were still doing their thing, but everything was localized. There was jams, social events, but no battles as such. So my first like years in the breaking was on the social side, going hanging out with Belfast City Breakers, partying, doing all that side of things, but also pretending to be a b-boy at the same
Yeah.
time.
Okay.
But then this Chinese b-boy came over, shout out Sun. You're probably not going to see this, but still love you, man. He brought so much character. He brought a real classic b-boy flavor with him.
Right.
Like he embodied that American style when he came over here. And I was on some weird abstract stuff at the time. I was just kind of trying anything breaking related, not really finding my style, but he kind of instilled a certain angle in me or whatever. But anyway, he convinced me to take part in a battle. So myself, an old friend Kim, Son, and then a couple others went down to Dublin to take part, and I was so scared, man. I was sweating, it was cold sweats, like, you know, proper nervous. And I remember them announcing our name to stand up in the battle, and it was a 5v5. There was only three of us, so we had to like ask two people to join us, and we won the battle.
Right.
And we qualified to go through to the next rounds, to the quarterfinals, and then
Uh-huh.
we drew the quarterfinals, and I'm like, oh, going from not believing in myself to
Yeah.
like, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do
Uh-huh.
this, and and it wasn't like, oh, we're gonna win the competition. It
Yeah.
wasn't about that. It was just the fact that I'm writing better than I actually thought I
Yeah.
was. And that's when it was like, when the drive home was something else. The drive down was like, oh geez, are we going to do this? Oh, I don't
Uh-huh.
want to do that. I don't. Going back, it was like, oh, let's do that again. And as soon as I got back to Belfast, we started organizing a battle. We
Right.
started to
Okay.
organize our own battle, and that became another journey in itself, and like a 5-year adventure of organizing a battle in a pub that turned out to be like
Uh-huh.
a European wide battle,
Brilliant.
and people flying from all over to come here for a
Cool.
battle. So it was just, again, that probably the most seminal moment in terms of going from someone who was practicing breakdancing to now, I'm a b-boy, I'm gonna do this right. I'm going to try and battle as much as I can, travel as much as I can, go meet as many b-boys and put myself out there. So yeah,
Brilliant.
shout out
For
to
the uninitiated, what's a battle? Because obviously we've mentioned
yeah.
it. We've mentioned it a few times. This idea of a battle, and for some that can kind of seem like that it almost has violent connotations, but it's anything. It's everything but.
Yeah, and it also has like cheesy connotations as well to it. And I'm not gonna lie, there is that element to it, but it's not like how the movies ever portrayed it. Like we were chatting earlier about breakdance the movie and all, just how badly portrayed it was, right? And that kind of left a bit of a stain on the scene, to the point that people did treat it like a fad, and they just, oh, don't want to do that anymore. It's what's the new thing. Sorry, what was your question again?
It was more along the lines of what is the battle?
Oh yeah,
Like,
sorry,
what's the
battle.
battle?
Yeah, so yeah, the battle format is you're, as you say, your crew's there. There's another crew. The original format of a battle was never like a judged thing. It was never a formal you guys versus these guys. You would rock up to a club. There'd be other people over there. They look like good dancers. We're good dancers. You put your best dancer against their best dancer, and that's the battle aspect. And who wins a battle is really judged by everyone watching.
Mm.
And then the crews go away and they're like, I think you won. It's like, I'll get him next time. And all right, he beat
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
And that's the little mind games. But nowadays, battles have evolved into more of a formal thing, high level, like intense high level. It's battles back in the day would have been one move versus one move, one breaker, one move. One guy would go out, hit a windmill, the other guy would try and beat his windmill.
Yeah.
Now breaking's evolved into, if you're doing a windmill, you're doing nothing really. You're like,
Yeah.
you have to be going out doing everything. It's like, it's just insanity where it's got to now, like in terms of just the level of tricks and complications and the ability level has just skyrocketed. So the battles now are intense. It's like an all out almost. It feels like really, really intense when you're at one because the energy that the breakers are putting out is intense. The energy that the crowd's giving back to them's massive as well. So then you just feel this growing hype throughout a battle. And then when things kick off, if they can kick off easily, because everybody's such high emotions, that if anybody bumps anybody, then people are getting on top of each other, like, oh, get back. But that's just the insecurities, I would say, in all of us that coming out at that point, acting tough and all. But ultimately, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, we're a bunch of men in a room dancing. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
but the thing is, but there is that whole thing because you did have that element of where competition heightens identity,
Uh-huh.
and if your crew and who you are, the way you dress, the
Right.
way you identify in front of a room, and if you're doing stuff and it looks like your moves are being taken,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not quite good enough, there is that
Yeah.
sense of that hey, it's not quite a threat, but you're kind of like, hey, that's not on. Like we need to get better. We need to do things
Mm-hmm.
differently. And I always remember when we were talking on the phone previously, and I remember the time that we met with BCB in Newton Arts, and we went down. We're like kind of going, listen, we'll be all right. We'll get up, we'll do our bit. We were just standing in a lane, and everybody then was doing their bit, whatever else. And then BCP come on afterwards with a whole routine,
Mm.
and we were like standing there going, "Oh my God, what have we just done? We've just made absolute
Yeah.
fools out of ourselves by thinking that each one of us stand in a lane, going do your bit, walking back and dancing to the roof's on fire that somehow we were God's gift
Mm.
to break and or whatever else.
Mm.
Then these guys come up with this completely choreographed
Yeah.
routine and just blew us out of the water. Like it wasn't even a classic battle kind of thing. It was just it was a competition. It was an organized competition. We went on did our bit. They come on and did theirs, and it was like kind of oh my word. And it really, but it's things like that that really got you to up your game because
Right.
whenever we went back to the community center, then after that, it was we need to work on a routine. We need to
Mm-hmm.
get
Mm.
a way of coordinating that. So if we come up against these guys again, we're going to be
Right.
a lot more prepared
Yeah.
for what we're doing. Whereas the classic battle kind of thing
Mm.
was that beat street thing.
Mm.
You've got your crew's on this side, the other crew's on this side, and you were going a wee bit. You were going
Yeah.
back and forward between each other and stuff.
Yeah. It
So
was all more unspoken as well back then, which just fed into that. Well, it feeds into your insecurities that drives you to then try and overcome that. And, so yeah, like in breaking, there's a saying like competition is tradition. And I think
mhm,
that's the sense of like, you should always be competing, even if it's with yourself. Like, and there's a lot of people, like I say this as well, that like, ultimately you're battling yourself, you're trying to beat who you were yesterday and always trying to grow,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
No, and I think that's right because you were always looking to kind of push yourself in regards to your
Mm.
moves, regardless of what that happened to be. If it was your groundwork and stuff, that you were always working on what's the best way of me to come out of this spin.
Yeah.
If I'm going to land a
Mm-hmm.
particular way, you were trying to manipulate yourself in such a way that you were able to get
Keep going.
into
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
particular pose
Mm-hmm.
from the end of a move and stuff. And you were always working on that. And then you were looking to always work from your rhythm step, going, how do you drop to the floor?
Right.
And then you were copying like, the Chico Daves and all this kind of stuff, So it was
Yeah.
like, it was all those kind
Yeah.
of things, you're like going, how do you get into that there and racking your shoulder trying to copy all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was you did start to really think about how do you combine your popping, your locking,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and your ground game and all that kind of things together, and but a lot of that came from watching other people or
Right.
I suppose for me the movies were one of the things. I suppose we're talking a wee bit about battling.
Mm-hmm.
Who won the Beach Street battle?
Oh, oh, I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to say only because we interviewed Ken Swift and I have a lot of love for Ken Swift. Rocksteady won that, I think. I mean, Rocksteady crew versus Dynamic Rockers. Who's a better name crew today? I would say Rocksteady to a certain degree, but Dynamic Rockers are still rocking too. So
Yeah, because
maybe they both
what the
won.
New York City Breakers are part of that as well. Weren't they?
Sorry,
They were
mate.
the
You're
New York
right.
City
You're right.
Breakers,
So I
weren't they?
got it
Yeah.
wrong.
No, it was.
Yeah, it was New York City
Because
Breakers.
I always remember New York City Breakers in the maroon. Because anytime you seen them, They were in maroon, and Beat Street kind
Uh,
of had that maroon thing going on, and then Rocksteady Roll was blue. That was my always take on it. Was
yes, yes, yeah, that's
yeah.
right. It is New York City Breakers. Don't know what
Yeah,
Rockers.
Mr. Wave and all, they were, that was classic, New York City Breakers, Mr. Wave and all
Yeah,
those kind
yeah.
of guys. But no, I have to say, I have there's a couple of moves from the Beat Street guys. Well, obviously they were called Beat Street in the movie. I thought were ridiculous. Mr. Wave was obviously, but Chico stuff was just
Right.
ridiculous too. Like
Yeah, yeah.
and even for me, the bit at the end, what Crazy Legs did at the end of the battle is nowhere near what Crazy Legs did
Mm,
after that. He started digging it because you see that from that part of the start of the evolution into what you were talking about there, the what B-boys have becoming today. It wasn't just about the back spinner, it was about the combination of
and the flow.
all of these moves, the
Mm,
flow going between them, him taking the shoes off onto his
hmm
hands and stuff
hmm
like that there. But that contortion type thing that you kind of
Yes.
see, it was like that was the start
Mm.
of that came right at the end of that. And in the end, but for me, I got at the end, I'm like, well, that move wouldn't have took the last move at all. Like, that was like
Yeah.
Crazy Legs got way better moves than that there. So for me, I know it doesn't sit well. Most people go down your lane and go, I rock steady took up, but I definitely think
All right.
New York,
Okay.
I think New York had, I do think New York had
Right,
it,
I'm
like,
gonna have to go back. It's been a while. I have to go back and watch it again. But yeah, no, it's a classic battle in the rock
It
scene.
is, it is. But do you know the thing is for me, even today, I hear that didn't. I'm like, oh, where let it go? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you're
It's
like
like, oh,
pushing
it's
people out of
like,
the way.
what's going on here? Get us get the circle going there. You know what I mean? But it is that Breaker's Revenge is an absolute
Yeah,
classic piece of that Arthur Baker
right.
thing is just ridiculous. In terms of even now, as I say, you just hear that and it's I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
the heads are going and all. So, but
The great thing about this as well is like everything you're talking about, from the fashion to the music to even like the people with boom boxes and lino on the floor, none of that's changed.
yeah.
Like we still rock up with a boom box and lino into the park at 39 years old, carrying us through the park. Like we don't care
Brilliant.
because it's in my it's respect for the culture in that sense. Like it's still cool to do that. And the fashion, like shell suits are still mad popular in the b-boy world, and if someone's rocking an 80s shell suit, they get even more respect. Fat laces. I'm all about the shell toes and everything, you know what I mean?
Oh,
So
brilliant! But I know it is one of those things, and I think for me, you did start to really delve deeper into the music and things as well. We're always looking for, the next, because one of the things that I found wasn't just about your moves; it was also about the music that you dance to. So
Mhm.
that what you like, for instance, if we were doing something, we would always have said, "Well, listen, if it's on our turf, this is the tune.
Mm,
This is the tune we wanna."
yeah,
We want to get
so
to.
like
You know
yeah.
what I mean? So it's like if these guys are coming to us, then
So you're having
this
a
is
home
what.
crowd favorite,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you've
yeah,
got your music for your moves, and
yeah. And then when you went somewhere else, they put something on, you going, God, I hate that tune. You know what I mean? But so it was just one of those things you kind of get into. It became. You're always looking for stuff. And as you say, hunting through things. I remember the first time that I got, is it Electro 6 that has all the Roxanne stuff on it? There's an Electro 5, obviously, is Breaker's Revenge.
that's a Street Sounds record,
Yeah,
yeah.
the street sound stuff.
Mhm.
I'm near sure Electro 6 is the one that had all the different rock songs, like Roxanne Shante and all those kind of
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
And the real rock song, there was the kind of the real play across that and stuff. I remember getting a hold of that and going, oh, this is great. But the one that really blew me away was New York versus LA Beats.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever heard this.
No.
Mate, get on to your B-boy mates and ask them about New York versus LA Beats. Alrighty, folks, that's the end of part one of this episode of the Bap and Two Meat podcast with Paul Ashford from Fifth Element NI. Make sure you join us next week for part two.